Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Simon from Games Deconstructed and I really like card games. That liking mostly stems from the fact that they present me with multiple interesting decision-making opportunities. I get to choose which cards I put in my deck, which of them to use when I'm presented with my initial hand, or any other hand really. But the form of decision-making that I find most elegant and as a result am most fond of is deciding in what order to play the cards, if I intend on playing more than one card within the game's preferred time unit, be it a turn, a round, or an encounter. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at sequencing, which is the big boy term for what I've just described in digital card games. We'll be looking at what design choices incentivize thinking about proper sequencing, how various titles try to make it interesting, and what other decision-making mechanics it interacts with. I'd much appreciate you giving the subscribe button a swift yet decisive tap if you haven't already, and let's delve into the world of sequencing immediately afterwards. Firstly, there are several boxes that a card game has to tick for sequencing to be of any importance whatsoever. Firstly, the player has to be working towards a goal within a time frame. That requires the use of multiple cards. If it's only one card, it's not going to be much of a sequence, is it? Deal 40 damage to kill an enemy before they kill you is a goal with a clear if conditional time frame. So is deal 10 damage this turn, which, if repeated 4 times, becomes the former sequence. Provided that the enemy didn't kill you first, of course. So you can work on a micro or macro scale here. Sequences that last a turn can in turn make up a sequence the length of a whole game. The second assumption is that the player's success in reaching that goal is based at least in some part on the order in which the aforementioned multiple cards are played. So if they choose the right order, they kill the enemy faster while taking less damage, using less resources, completing bonus objectives, you get the drift. Finally, you are not going to do damage using 5 defensive cards, no matter the order. So sequencing decisions are often based on, if not dependent on, card selection decisions. First you choose which cards will help you achieve the goal, then you choose in which order. A very popular idea in the roguelike deckbuilder genre given form by Slay the Spire and its 900 descendants is the use of conditional effects or bonuses on cards. A card like Auto Shields, telling me that if I have no block, I get block, is one of the simplest forms within the scope of this idea. Its effectiveness is going to be based on whether I've played cards that give me block earlier this turn, before I'd like to play it. If I did, I'm wasting an energy to pay the card's cost of 1 because it's not providing me with any foreseeable benefits. I am, in other words, making a mistake because I am a dumb man. If I did not, it is providing me with a benefit, and one that's larger than if I played a card that didn't require me to jump through hoops. The problem with that is that, while it works well as a balancing factor for the card, it doesn't really provide an opportunity for interesting decision making, and that's because it lacks complexity. If I've read the card, I just don't play it if I don't satisfy the condition. I might occasionally blunder into gaining block, playing some card draw ability, and then drawing into a dead card, but that's not the type of design that will ever make me feel smart. At best, it's going to make me feel like I know how to read. A better example would be something like Grand Finale, a card that requires jumping through a very difficult hoop, in return offers a purposely overpowered effect. And when the player, such as me, finds themselves able to utilize it, they are going to feel smart. What also works better is cards with softer conditions. If the last card was the equivalent of an if loop in programming, these would be for or while loops. Cards like flechettes. Flechettes? Cards like flechettes, which deals damage for every skill card in my hand, which is one of the few possible card types in Slay the Spire. This creates a more interesting decision space. Say I have it in my hand with a couple of card drawing skills. Do I use the card draw first, in hopes of drawing into even more skills that will increase the damage, while knowing full well that I might draw into other types of cards, thus decreasing the damage? Or do I play it immediately and draw later? which option will deal more total damage and which option is going to be more reliable in dealing enough damage to kill the enemy before I have to take damage myself or before I get killed. And while this idea is also solvable mathematically, it at least also presents some sort of an interesting conundrum for the player, whose playstyle will have a bearing on the decision they make, unlike the case of auto shields. And while cards like flechettes are not fundamentally different from cards like auto shields, they are just a series of if loops. They allow the players to decide between more different states, and that's more interesting. Cards with a builder and spender mechanic work essentially the same. Griftlands really likes this type of design, by the way. In Sal's, the first main character's deck, you've got cards that build a resource known as combo, and cards that spend combo. Another idea to enhance the importance and salience of sequencing is to ascribe additional significance to the position of a card in a sequence, like the first card or the last card played in a turn having an additional effect. A game that does this really well is Roguebook. The novelty of the game is that you control two characters and their positions, front or back, are important. The character Shada deals additional damage when standing in front, irrespectively or whether her cards are played first or last, while Soroko, the tanky frog gentleman you can see on screen right now, receives additional block, but mind you, only if he ends turn in front. The character in front at turn's end will receive the sum of block generated by both characters, but any damage overflow will be dealt to their personal health pool. So this incentivizes a playstyle in which Shada is in front for as long as she's dealing damage, while Soroko gets swapped into front position at the end of the turn just to tank. And while any defensive skill used by any of the characters in the back will move them to the front, there are also cards with the charge keyword that allow changing positions while giving different effects, such as dealing damage. The genius here stems from the fact that the goal of the sequence, who's in front when, basically, is directly linked to several contextual factors. Even if my go-to sequence is Shada does damage, then tags in Soroko, who takes damage, who then in return tags in Shada, who deals more damage, etc. That's probably going to change if Soroko is on his last legs and last HP. This paradigm is also combined with great use of conditional cards that we've talked about before, like cards with the combo keyword that get cheaper if the last card played belonged to the other character. And while Roguebook definitely has some fresh ideas on how to influence player decisions on card order, Slay the Spire also kind of did that, with the defects orbs, for example, being evoked for a short-term immediate benefit in order from right to left, for example, with the remaining orbs further to the left staying as sort of semi-permanent passive benefits on a smaller scale. Or with the water stances, like the Wrath stance, which was great for damage dealing, but not so great for ending your turn in, as it also doubled the damage you received. One of my favorite competitive multiplayer card games is Gwent, and what Gwent does differently from MTG or Legends of Runeterra is their approach to card draw. A game of Gwent is divided into up to 3 rounds. Whoever wins 2 of them is the overall winner. At the start, each player draws 10 cards out of the 25 cards total in their decks, with an additional 3 being drawn at the start of the following rounds. So in a typical game of Gwent, a player will see at least 16 out of the 25 of their chosen cards. You usually, barring a few very specific exceptions, play 1 card a turn. So as a result, the game becomes less about which cards will I play, because I will be playing most if not all of them, and more about which cards will I play this turn. And while there are also mini sequences within a turn, between cards played and manual activations of abilities of other cards already on the field, the macro sequence, the alternating tango between you and your opponent, is really the meat of the game. Do I play my best card now, or do I wait for them to use removal on something else? If I play my chunky boy on turn 2, do I have a way of winning round 3, 18 cards from now? Well, maybe not 18, but you get the drift. So even though we've previously established that sequencing is very closely linked to card selection, in this case having a large pool of cards visible at the same time that I can select from with forced alternating play order requires me, the player, to concentrate on the order in which I'd like to play. Reacting to my opponent's haymaker with a perfect counter is always well and good, but what am I going to play next if I played that counter this turn? And this of course is combined with the addition of cards that like to be played either before or after cards of a specific type, like this one, or even this one. And being able to find the perfect place to play these, called engine cards by the community, ideally somewhere between too early and too late, is going to be the difference between victory and defeat in many cases. Finally, a small cautionary note. Emphasizing proper sequencing in a card game is almost always synonymous with increasing its complexity. And if the level of complexity ever gets too high, it can cause a state called analysis paralysis, which apart from sounding funny, means that the player is aware of the possible repercussions of suboptimal play and as a result are unable to decide on a good way to proceed. Similarly, if the consequences of bad sequencing are more emphasized than the benefits of good sequencing, you run the risk of your game appearing snobby and unkind to the player. But if used well, sequencing is a treat to be enjoyed by all players. Thanks a lot for watching. It was a blast for me to be able to delve into something a bit more technical but very closely related to my enjoyment of some titles that I really do enjoy. As always, let me know in the comments below about any and all examples of excellent sequencing in games I haven't mentioned in the video, clicking on what I collectively refer to as the YouTube buttons, that being the subscribe, like and bell icon buttons, is also very appreciated. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.